Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. For those who aren't familiar with me, my name is Miles and I have schizoaffective disorder. This means that I experience symptoms from both schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. Because of this, I end up in the hospital from time to time, and I do videos here kind of updating people on what that process is normally like and some of the things that go on. In this video, I'm kind of gonna do a little bit of like a life update. I'm gonna talk about the last time that I was in the hospital, which I haven't mentioned or spoken about here yet, and then where I'm kind of currently at. So rewinding a few months ago, I fell into a really deep depression that became so bad I considered ending my life. And I was certain I only had set time in which to do so. Very foolishly, I set a date and I was like, okay, everything important that I need to do will be taken care of by this date, and then I can pass on peacefully, or that was the mindset, even though that was not the correct way to be thinking. During this time, I had gotten really heavily into injuring myself, so much so that I had basically gone deep enough to open arteries that were then bleeding semi-uncontrollably at times. I also had an abscess that had gotten infected, and while I was cleaning it and taking care of it, it was the first time I've actually ever been or had any of my wounds become infected, so it was getting to the point where I believe it was a medical concern once people kind of realized that's what was going on. Because I had set a date, those around me were incredibly concerned about me, and my family decided to take action. I was away from my house for the day, doing one of the last big events that I was going to attend before the day where I planned to end things. And long story short, when I came home, there was a moving van in the driveway, and my parents had gotten into my house and moved out a whole room, my whole bedroom, had moved that out and transferred it to a spare room in their house, and basically told me it's not safe for you to live here by yourself anymore, so we're accepting you back and you can come back and live with us because we don't have another option. And I walked into my house and I realized half of my things are gone, and they were telling me things like, you are only gonna have so much room for certain animals, and other animals are gonna have to live outside. And they had mentioned maybe a few weeks prior to this incident, kind of floated the idea to me of, you're not doing well, we think you should move back in. And I had told them no. It did not work for us all to live in the same house, and it was not healthy for me to return to that, but they didn't know what to do, so they decided to just make it happen, even though I wasn't in agreement. When I realized that's what they were doing, I went into the bathroom at my house and I locked the door, and I would not let anyone in. And I was yelling at them and screaming at them and very upset, to know that they had moved my things and everything was out of place, and I was very upset. They realized this and called the crisis team, which partners with the local police. And basically, I was in the bathroom and there was a weapon in the bathroom. So the crisis team involves not only the sheriff, but I guess they're weapons people, people who know how to deal with disarming and whatnot. So again, long story short, one lady who had been a part of the crisis team and had been out to calls with me before, she stepped up and tried to talk with me. I was upset. I wanted them to leave me alone. And I think I had mentioned something, I was just kind of raging, and I mentioned something about, it's not worth going on to live in a place you don't want to live. I cannot go back to live with family, and she would not let up. Specifically, she wanted me to put my hands out the door and unlock the door and talk with her. And through, quite a while of her badgering me, I said, if you promise not to touch me or bother me, I will unlock the door and step out of the bathroom, which she had told me she just wanted to get me into the family room area so that we could talk. And, I'm not a stupid person by any means, but she had spent quite a while trying to convince me of this, and so I thought, all right, I will step out of the bathroom. Meanwhile, what I did not know was that they had officers, the sheriff, and the entire crisis team waiting there to pretty much just tackle me and drag me out of the house, and then to take me to the ambulance that was waiting outside. From there, things go how they usually go. The only difference this time was that there was one officer basically in charge of pain compliance, which is causing someone pain so that they do what you want. His job was just to hold my arms behind my back until they hurt so much that I was screaming at him, and therefore couldn't be biting, kicking, and targeting other members of the team. Because of that, I feel like things were a little bit less crazy than normal, but definitely not so much so that they didn't try to sedate me like they normally do. I was given multiple injections of Versed in the ambulance, and when I ended up in the ER, I was so unmanageable that they gave me Haldol. And I planned on doing a separate video about this experience because it's on my medical records and noted and was shared with them that I have an adverse reaction to Haldol. So basically, I experienced something called acute dystonia. And this is where your muscles will lock up, and it can be very painful, and your eyes will roll back in your head, and you get stuck that way until a remedy is provided, basically. But instead of doing a full video on that, I just decided to add it to this one. I was so out of it on the Haldol that they were able to draw my blood and get me through the ER. And then I was sent to one of the hospitals that I've been at before, which is pretty much known for holding patients and then releasing them, not necessarily assisting anyone. And this is actually the same hospital that, if you're familiar with my channel, Officer M ended up taking me to, so it was the same place. They know me there. Despite all of that, it took me an entire day of experiencing symptoms of acute dystonia where I could not lie down because my body was rigid, my neck was quirked at a very odd angle, I could not get my eyes to focus on anything, they kept rolling back in my skull, I couldn't sit down, and I was having a hard time seeing things. I went to the staff as this was happening and asked for assistance, and they didn't do anything about it. They tried to get me my regular meds and said that that wouldn't happen until the evening, and then let me go the rest of the day in a state where I was pretty much holding on to the doorpost of my ward room because I could not do anything else, and I lost the ability to talk, and I lost the ability to basically swallow. So I was doing very poorly. I stayed at the entrance of my wardroom and tried to flag down staff members, but they would continually kind of brush me off, and so I was stuck that way all day, which I have never had a reaction that has lasted that long, because the only other time I had that reaction, I was immediately attended to. So I make it all day that way, And my parents come to visit me that evening, and I'm still completely locked up. I can barely sit in a seat. I can't talk to them. I can't look at them. I'm making noises at them. And they call over a nurse finally and say, something's wrong. This is not right. She's not acting right. Like, what are you doing about this? And they didn't know why I was having that reaction, because it was the ER that chose to give me Haldol, even though I have it marked down that I have this reaction to Haldol. They were desperate enough that they gave it to me anyway, and then they did not relay that information to the ward that I was transferred to. So my parents say, you need to take care of this. She's not doing well. And they basically get 3 nurses to come and walk me out of the visiting room and take me into one of the bathrooms. And all I can remember is they sat me down in a chair and closed the bathroom door. And a nurse came in with a syringe and gave me some sort of injection. And within probably 2 to 3 minutes at best, I was able to move my neck and look at people and nod and shake my head to questions. So that was kind of like the first screw up, if you will. The next few days were relatively uneventful. I was supposed to be doing a med trial while I was there. My parents dropped off the trial medication package there at the hospital, and because it was a trial, they denied it. So then an official script was sent. However, it accidentally had the wrong dosage on it, so it had to be rewritten and resent, and it was going to take another possible week and a half for the hospital to get it. So the psychiatric team met together and said, we need to come up with what to do. And then they all met with me, and their grand idea was, you've tried a lot of medications, you've tried a lot of therapies, but you've never tried ECT, which is electroconvulsive therapy. And when I say that, you know, the image comes up in your head of like these people in old asylums lying on a table, you know, having a current run through their brains, and like it's just this horrible, barbaric picture. And I'm standing in the room being assessed by a team of professionals, and that's the best idea they could come up with. And I say, no, I would never agree to that. And their argument was, well, you've never tried it, so you can't know that you'd want to deny it. It might actually help. You should really give it a chance. And so I realized, okay, like, we're done here. They cannot help me, and I'm not going to do something that is compromising my brain. There was another patient there, and she would be like halfway through a sentence, and then she'd go, oh, what was that? Oh, wait. What was I saying? I'm so sorry. I completely lost my train of thought. It's just the ECT. It messes with my brain. And I am like, I am not going to become like that. There's no way. I was altogether put off by the idea and very uncomfortable being in the care of people who thought that that was the best they could offer. So a few more days go by, and I say, okay, what if I med trial this medication that I'm supposed to be on at home? I agree to go ahead and try it out at home, and the team doesn't really like that idea, but they can't really hold me for forever, and if I don't want to do ECT, they don't really have another option. So I am stuck there for a little while longer. In that time, just trigger warning, I am basically sexually harassed by another male patient there, to which the facility didn't really know how to handle that. I was actually more calm about the entire process than the nurse that I had to report this to. The head of the hospital actually came and spoke with me because I guess they've never had this happen before. And they came in bright and early and asked me to file, or, asked if I wanted to file a police report. And given my history with law enforcement, that wasn't an option for me. I wouldn't have been able to manage that. So their grand idea was to move me down a room from this person who caused the issue, which I still had to walk past his room to get to the day room, the cafeteria, everything. So it was in no way a solution to the problem. My parents actually called the hospital and said, you need to move her to another floor. We don't want her on the same floor as somebody who's already caused these issues. And while they had already spoken to this person, they had an idea to move me to basically what is referred to as the calm floor. So the bottom floor where I was is basically a catch-all. And the calm floor is where pretty much most of the alcoholics go. Or rather, recovering alcoholics, recently sober, clear-minded sort of people are housed. And I only say this because everybody I met there was an alcoholic. Nobody else was there for similar reasons except for one patient, which I didn't know this. I just thought, it's for people, I had been told it's for people who want to engage in therapy, which they do not provide on the main floor, maybe over 1 or 2 times a day, and the sessions are 15 minutes or less at times. Up there, I was told they do longer sessions, they have a library, people get to engage in crafts and therapeutic activities. It's the calm floor for people who can manage that. Now, I was always told about this floor. I knew that it existed, but I was never offered an invitation to this floor because of how I was brought into the hospital and my behaviors on the ward. So they agreed to let me move up there, and I think, okay, this is a good idea. But what I didn't realize is the calm floor was almost too calm for me. So I was up there pacing, and because it was so quiet and everyone was so inactive, I was talking to myself and singing to myself and kind of just feeling like the odd one out. Everybody there was very calm. They all sat and spoke quietly. On the main floor, everybody paces. It's just part of the society, if you will. And up on the calm floor, there was no one pacing. So I felt very singled out. And I said, if I have to spend much more time here, I feel like I'm going to lose it. It's just too quiet, and I don't feel right here. Thankfully, I was only there for 2 days, and then the team agreed to release me on the condition that I go home to my parents and not back to my own house, because they didn't feel like I had made any progress to be able to be released to do that. So my parents agree. Since most of my things are already moved to their house anyway, they said, you'll come back to us, you'll do the med trial there, and you'll be under our supervision. So the hospital agrees on that condition to release me, and I go home with them. Now, I hadn't been back to their house to stay for a very long time, and there's a lot of old skeletons in the closet and ghosts in the hallway and trauma that came from the time that I had spent there a long time ago. And so I was not really doing well, but I kind of hid that because I wanted to be seen as prospering, as getting better, making strides and whatnot. All I really wanted was to move back into my own place, and that's what I wanted to work towards and fight for. And I really wasn't going to be pleased anywhere else, so that was the best possible place, even though it wasn't, maybe the safest place. It was the only place that I really wanted to be, and I was willing to work towards that. It was also the case that if I lost that housing arrangement where I lived on my own, I would not be able to get it back. That would be kind of like the final straw. So I was very intensely motivated to just please don't lose the house, don't lose the house. After a little over a week, my parents decided to agree to let me move back in. And it wasn't until I had fully moved back in that they kind of let me know that the majority of my care team had quit. I was seeing a specialist who said they weren't comfortable seeing me anymore and that they thought that I should be in a long-term care facility. And my family had actually tried to talk me into going to a short-term care facility upon release, but a handful of things about that situation made it unfeasible to do. But because the specialist thought that that was the only real option and I wasn't going to do that, she told me she was not willing to work with me anymore. One of the therapists I had been seeing also said they thought they had reached the ceiling with what they could assist me with, and they stopped seeing me. They also conferred that they thought a care facility was best. My psychiatrist met with me once or twice and basically kind of said it was up to me where I wanted to take things next, and that he wanted to see how the med trial was going to go. So I continued taking Auvelity, which many people have already seen the video I did on how that went, which was not well. Not only did it erase the depression, but it erased all of my emotions, even the good ones, and then ended in causing severe cognitive impairment that pretty much meant I stopped being able to understand the world around me. If you want more information on that process and you haven't seen the original video, I will have that linked in the description and at the end of this video if you would like to check that out, but that's all I'm going to say on that matter. So after having those things happen, I did stop taking Auvelity. And when that happened, the psychiatrist kind of said, okay, well, there's some other things that we can try, but you don't seem to really want to do that. You don't like the side effects, and coming fresh off of a med trial that went bad at home, I didn't feel safe trialing another medication that could possibly do similar things at home at all. So he kind of stopped contacting me on what to do next. Almost like I had sort of reached the end of what he could assist me with. At that time, I was still kind of fresh off of being out of the hospital, so the only thought was like, don't go back, don't mess up. And, most importantly, like, take care of your wounds and do not cause harm to yourself. My parents got together and sat me down, and it was supposed to be kind of like a planning pep talk, but it turned more into a final warning. And basically, they said the crisis team had been called out to my house too many times in the year, and that they had told my parents that the next time they were called out, more action than just hospitalization is required because they've been called out so many times in a short time span, more or less. And if that happened, it would be harder to get back home after I go back to a hospital or to any form of treatment. The team, even at the hospital, was already relatively reluctant about releasing me, and it would be even harder for my parents to argue for that and for me to return to my house versus some other form of treatment upon release. So I realized I am on borrowed time, and this was at the end of summer, beginning of fall, approximately. And so the idea was you make it to 2026 and don't have any problems until then. But no one had really planned on how we were going to go about that. My mom sat me down and made me write a list of reasons why I shouldn't harm myself anymore, and put that up on the wall and asked me to read it every day. And my father started by initially taking me out to do more things, trying to keep me active. We sat down about a month ago with my remaining therapist and tried to come up with a plan of what to do to keep this depression from worsening, because at that point it was steadily, just from the point I got out of the hospital and returned to my house, it was just steadily going downhill, and we weren't doing anything about it. So I had that meeting with my parents and my therapist, which went very poorly, but what we could agree upon was that I wanted to get out more and do things and have a more varied selection of activities in my week that included being out in nature and going approved places with my service dog, and that was something my family could help me with. So fast forward to about 2 weeks ago, and we had already spoken about putting this plan in place, and 1 or 2 trips were made, and then my parents go on vacation. So during this time, they're not around, and so the plans that we usually would have done, they don't happen. And my parents are gone for over a week, and I think it was in that week that I really just started plummeting. And I had told my therapist, going to the beach and going out to my favorite stores with the dog and, doing all of these things are only going to work for so long. And then it's going to get to the point where the depression takes over, and regardless of going out and doing things I would have seen as fun, I'm not going to enjoy those anymore as things get worse. And I am like a huge proponent of just calling it like it is and saying it's too little too late. And I feel like this cycle that started last November has been on repeat this entire year. I'm not treating my depression. I'm on a medication to stabilize the hallucinations, and I'm on a medication for sleep, and I'm on a hallucination mood stabilizer combo that mainly treats the schizophrenia symptoms and the mania that comes with the bipolar aspect of things, which basically leaves the depression on its own, untreated and unchecked. It always gets progressively worse until it returns to the same spot. And then I'm called in and I go to the hospital, and the hospital makes things worse, and then they release me and I'm okay for a month or so, and then the same cycle repeats itself and I end up in the same situation. Right now, the best way to describe it is just an all-encompassing weariness and disinterest in life. I have horrible nightmares every night that leave me completely exhausted, as if I haven't slept a wink. I barely manage to get up and take care of my animals, and then I normally either get back in bed or spend the rest of my daytime hours on the couch. I find little to no interest or enjoyment out of regular activities. I've canceled going out of the house to do my weekly shopping and go to hang out with my family. Everything just takes too much effort. It's like being constantly weighed down by enormous sandbags, and you just can't get them off of your back. And I've spent the last week or so working on art that I hate. I look at it and I hate all of it. I can't get the enjoyment that I do out of what I do best, in my opinion, which is a really tough pill to swallow. And even the art I did for this video, I'm not happy with it. I look at it and it upsets me. There have been days where I will spend the entire day just crying on and off, and it doesn't even have to be for a reason. It will just happen. And I know I'm not coping well. I know that the coping techniques that I have been given, they don't work for this level of depression. I think it is down to a question of medication, but I can't safely try medications here without supervision at my house. And I am supervised at all times, but I'm talking about the direct supervision like one would have in a hospital. So I'm kind of just stuck because I don't really have a comprehensive care team anymore. The specialist that I was seeing, our hope had been that she would possibly address things and her expertise might be helpful. So to have her tell me that she's not willing to work with me anymore, that's been pretty rough. I'm realizing, as much as I want someone to have answers, everybody around me is kind of scratching their heads. They don't really know what to do or how to help, and they're looking to me for those answers. But if I had those answers, I would be putting them into practice already, and I don't know what to do except to return to what I've found that works, which is that if I cause myself harm, I can manage another few days, and that becomes like the only thing that keeps me going, which is self-destructive, and it never ends well. And I know it's not the right thing to do, but I have become so desperate because nobody knows what to do. I think as a child I went through a period of time where that was the case, but during that time we were constantly seeing new specialists and new psychiatrists, and everybody was willing to and wanted to more or less like take a crack at my case, and no one wanted to give up. As a child, you see somebody with a future, you see kids as being the future, and I feel like back then I know this is wrong, but I feel like back then I was more worthy of saving. And now I've kind of just become a statistic, which I mentioned on one of the videos that I did recently about talking to my younger self. I want this to be a helpful project, and I feel like this has kind of just turned into me, I don't even know. I'm not sure where things are going to go from here. I just know that the holidays are normally a relatively stressful time for me, family-wise, and I'm looking at facing that with the thought of dealing with this depression throughout and struggling to make it to next year simply to say I made it and I really had no other choice, which sounds really bad, and I don't want it to sound that bad. It's what it is. But I wanted to get this video up and kind of just share the experience with my last hospitalization and how things have digressed. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if that means that I'll be taking a break from this channel. I found it really hard to make projects recently because I have zero desire to do things. So I feel like I've hit a dead end, and that for someone like me is very, very frightening and causes a lot of despair. I know that God has not left me and that He still has a plan, but I'm having a hard time seeing it at the moment, just with how things have gone. I would appreciate prayers if anyone thinks of me, and I will try to keep everybody updated and getting content out when I can. Yeah. So, real quickly, I'll just talk about this art piece. It is a little bit on the gory side. I apologize. I realized that the art I was trying to work on was just something I wasn't connecting with. So I decided to do kind of like a vent piece, and this is more or less what came of it. Kind of needing to be in pain and to hold on to the one thing that makes sense to me, which is what I'm holding in the picture, while all of these hands that are supposed to be helping me are just kind of holding on nearby, trying to influence me, but not really touching me or making a difference. It's kind of a dire picture, but it's how I felt like expressing myself. As always, I love you all. Thank you so much for listening to me go on and on about this. I do appreciate it. You guys are awesome, and I wish you all the best. Bye.